Start recording.
Okay,
what are we calling this thing?
I don't know, we'll title it, but it's just the difference between, it's kind of like this codependent dynamic about being responsible to someone's feelings, but not for their feelings, right? Like, what is that line? How do you describe it? Because I can say that and people are like, oh yeah, I agree, but what does it mean? Like, what does it look like? You know, how do you play that out? Like, if I want to try to do that in my marriage or with my coworkers, my friends, my family, how do you execute that?
Yeah.
So I'll start out by describing it, I think, what it means, and then like analyzing, I guess, how that gets played out.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to need a situation. I've got an example. Is what I mean.
I can count on you for a situation.
You're going to say something. Can't let it go.
It's a full-on situation.
Not
no full-on situations. It's too much for this podcast.
It's way too much.
Just a situation.
Yeah. Just one.
Smaller is better.
Mm-hmm.
You would know.
I was so trying to swallow that fast enough that I could.
I'm sure you were.
I was like, no, I need it.
Sure
Not. No, I will call that. Oh, that's all I got. No.
Bing. Bing. Home run champion over here. Everyone's the home run derby. You're just lobbing those things up. Bing.
Oh.
All right, ready?
No.
Oh, this is good. Okay. Hey everyone, welcome to the Shrink Think Podcast. We are back. We're back.
And we're back.
And we're back.
And
with
we're back.
Another riveting, exciting episode. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about codependency, but it's kind of in a more specific way. One of the things that I think I got this from the Cloud and Townsend book, Boundaries. That's fantastic. I reference it all the time, but in it they talk about the difference between being responsible to someone's feelings versus being responsible for someone's feelings. Because in this day and age, in our culture, everyone's got feelings, big feelings, and my feelings are untouchable, and that's my truth and all that kind of stuff. And so this idea is like, it actually has made people pretty codependent because you have to, in this culture anyway, be worried about other people's feelings and in a sense take care of other people's feelings, which creates a codependency dynamic. And it happens particularly in close relationships, like in marriages or in families or close friendships or whatever. And so we want to talk about and unpack what does it mean to take responsibility for someone's feelings, and then to essentially scale that back appropriately in a healthy way so that you're only responsible to their feelings, but not for their feelings.
Yes, indeed. Okay. What I'm thinking about is situations. One of the places where codependency came up in the very beginning, where they were, most studied, I guess, is in the alcoholic family, because the feelings are all over the place, right? And so people don't want the feelings to be all over the place, so they change how they are in order that the feelings are not all over the place, right? So that would be being responsible for somebody's feelings. And the culture that started up with the cancel culture, that's the same thing, because everybody will freak out if you say something. And so now you're like, oh my goodness, I have to be responsible for their feelings. I can't say all of these things or else they're going to freak out.
Yeah, so essentially I have to make sure that you feel okay all the time. And if you get upset or if you get concerned or offended or whatever, I have to do something to assuage your feelings so that you feel better. It's my job essentially to make you feel better. And somehow I become your emotional masseuse, right? That if you're tense, I have to assuage in kind of a massaging way. That's the word I came up with when I said it. I have to massage that down so that you feel relaxed and feel better, thank you.
You should see his face when he's doing that. It's creepy. Anyway, and now, Aaron, do our mental health therapists assuage?
That's a good question. No, we're not. A good therapist, I think, ought to be able to help their clients, help you identify what you're feeling and show appropriate, I call it care or compassion, even empathy toward your feelings, but that's not the same thing as taking on your feelings and making you feel better. What that I think looks like in the therapy room, for example, would be if a client is upset about something, if they're talking about, a situation and they start crying, they feel sad, or maybe there's some grief or something that's happening. I, as a therapist, feel a lot of compassion. I can feel sad, I can feel along with them. I don't feel the urge to need to move them out of it necessarily. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like I need to get you to feel better, because that's essentially communicating that what you're feeling is not okay. And then it teaches you that when you are feeling this way, you should expect me to do something to make you feel better.
Right.
And I'm not going to, because I want you, the client, the person who's got the feelings, to feel your feelings and to be able to move yourself out of your feelings or to handle them in some way appropriately. And I can guide you in that, but I can't do it for you.
So it's about helping people learn to tolerate what they're feeling.
And even to take ownership of, first of all, that's like the really first part of it, is to take ownership of, these are my feelings, not my feelings that you need to do something about. They're my feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that ownership piece, I mean, you say it like that, and there's a tendency, I think, for the audience to go, okay. But the reality is that step is a gigantic step. Like going ahead and accepting. We've talked about this in other episodes, but not maybe in this way. Taking a moment to like realize what you feel and to own it is at the point where you can actually start understanding what it is that you're tolerating.
Yeah, and it's doing something for the relationship that I think is really, really important. And if you're listening to this episode on a podcast, I really want to encourage you to head on over to our YouTube channel and watch it, because I'm a visual person. I'm using my hands here, and we're talking about a relationship. And so it's important that when you own your feelings, you identify what you're feeling, and then the other person is identifying and owning their feelings. There's like this unblending that happens, this like separation, yeah, like that, where it like clarifies the feelings of the one person and then the feelings of yours, so that now, and if you sort of imagine a pile of, let's just talk about like Halloween candy, if you've got like a big pile of candy and it's like, okay, which ones are yours and which ones are mine on the table in front of us, you've got your pile and I've got my pile. Now everything is so much clearer, because I know that if something's happening, I'm like, oh, that's yours. That's not mine. And okay, so then the next part of that too is, when somebody has a feeling, it's really easy for people to say, oh, that's not my feeling, that's yours. Oh, well, then I don't care.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's not what we're saying. It's not like you stop caring because like, well, those are your feelings, they're not my feelings, so you need to own them, so there. It's like, no. That's a lack of compassion.
Yes. And that's the other side of it. There's a book by Weinhold and Weinhold called Flight from Intimacy. And they I think focus a little more on that. It's this idea that at the point when you go like, oh, that's yours, bye. It's just emotional abandonment. It's like, or inattunement. So you realize, this actually is kind of, I believe, somewhat developmental when you start to realize that you have your own feelings and the other person doesn't. I mean, you know that. I would say everybody listening to this episode would be like, I already know that. You guys are wasting your time. But you don't. But
practically, experientially, in application, I don't think you really do, because if you're still taking responsibility for somebody else's, you don't really understand what that looks like in practicality.
Right. So the first step, realizing the separation, there's a temptation to go, oh, sweet. Well, you have fun over there. I'm going to go this way. Bye-bye. Mm-hmm. Or you can't make me feel blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, hands on your hips and your hair starts moving. So that none of that is actual attunement. I mean, because we're talking about attunement. The reality is, though, if you think about the tuning fork, like where you just slap it and it starts making noise, it's like two forks together make a different, like, wobbly, nasty, weird thing. Mm-hmm. And you separate them out, and then you can actually hear, like,
the tonal difference.
Right. So it's like, we're talking about that. That means you're not getting out of a relationship. You're getting, actually, in a way, more into it, because there's more of you there, because you can actually put you into it. Whereas before, you don't know where you are. because you're trying so hard to make whatever emotions in the room go away or somehow be feel okay, whatever that means, because that's going to be different in every situation, that you might not actually even go into any of the feelings that you actually have, because you're not even tolerating anything that's going on, because you're focused solely on making sure that the situation is fine.
Right. You're not aware of or tolerating any of your feelings, let alone the other person's. Another way of saying that or looking at that is like, in order to help the other, what you perceive as getting the other person to feel better, in order to help them with their feelings, you have to move yours aside, ignore or abandon your own feelings to be there for the other person's feelings. And that means, in a certain sense, you as a person become invisible. Or in an enmeshed dynamic, there's a saying that's like, if in a relationship, if two of you are in agreement, if two of you are always agreeing or feeling the same thing, then one of you is irrelevant. And that's kind of what's happening, is like you're just becoming irrelevant to the other person. And that makes sense if your like top value is like harmony and peace in the relationship, but it's coming at the expense of actual intimacy and actual personhood, because it's not real harmony and it's not real peace, because it's this fake enmeshed, we're believing the same thing. But when you can separate each other's stuff out, and I've got my feelings, you've got yours, well, that means we're going to have some disagreements. That means we're going to have some differences that we actually have to work out and come to some agreement and find real, true peace and harmony together, which may sometimes just be like an agree to disagree. So the initial point of I've got my feelings, you've got yours, is a key first step in identifying who's responsible for what. And I say this all the time as a therapist. Okay, you're responsible for these things that you said and that you feel. I'm responsible for these things that I say and do and that I feel. Now we can look at the interaction between the two. That's where it gets kind of messy, is because I might say something or do something, and then you've got some feelings about it, right? And then, so what does it mean to be responsible to your feelings that I've caused, or I did something and I hurt you or I upset you, disappointed you somehow? So I got to be responsible to those feelings, but not for those feelings. What the heck does that mean?
Yeah, one of the things I just was, as an example, I think it's easier that way. Let's say, I'm going to make something up. So let's say one partner in the relationship feels like the other one doesn't get them, and just in general, so they feel kind of alone. And now they are in, so the setup is, we're just going to do the typical quote unquote husband and wife and kids. Okay. Husband's on the couch, whatever, watching TV. Wife is in an escalating argument with a kid in the other room. Now she's worked hard on her, like, to try to manage what's going on, like in her own self, that kind of thing. And the escalation keeps happening. It just keeps going. Finally, husband comes in and tries to just fix everything. Like, we're going to make everything go. You go over there. You go over there. This is it.
You do this. You do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And
get back to your homework.
And then wife's story behind that is you're never here. You don't even know what's happening. I feel so alone. And then you show up like this. You sat out by the TV this whole time. If you really cared, you would have came in earlier. We just bothered you because we were so loud with the TV, like when you were watching it. And now, fast forward, the emotions do matter. Like the stuff that's going on does actually matter. Really, in my little analogy there, the thing that the husband would be doing wrong would be controlling the entire thing when he got there. I mean, if that thing inside of him to go, oh no, there's a problem, like I'm going to go rescue, like
fix or solve,
is not wrong. Like, it's like, it's like you're responding to a siren, so to speak, of a problem. Yeah.
There's something happening legitimately and you want to do something about it. Fine, great.
Right. So when you go there, to be there, you are there. You don't know, you have to trust that, okay, I've got to do some information gathering as far as what's going on. Not so I can fix it, just so I can trust that we can figure out a way to tolerate this disagreement as a family. Like, how do we get there? You're coming in and witnessing it, so to speak. So you might acknowledge what's going on, acknowledge, for example, who everybody is that you know them to be. Like, I know you don't want to be treating each other like this. I'm not sure what's happened. You know, I don't know if this is a good time for you guys to keep talking about it, because everybody's, I don't know where you guys are at. Do you feel escalate? Do you feel like this is an argument? Because it sounds like it is. Like, trying to get all your assumptions out, because some people talk louder and then they figure things out and they de-escalate. Maybe you feel as a person in the family that you already know everything. You already know that, no, when this happens it always goes this way. Like, don't do that. Like, it might not be going that way, and it creates a different space, because it allows the assumption, as you're being responsible to what they feel, that they can look at what they feel essentially at that point, and and be like, oh man, Dad usually does XYZ. It's like turning the apple cart upside down.
Yeah, so I want to slow that down actually quite a bit, because I like to help people identify, because they always get confused. You can say that example and it happens so fast, and you can tell people do this, do that, but I always like to look at, well, what really is going on first? And you were kind of describing this when you said you can jump into the scenario and see that there's a problem, and instead of solving it, stop and ask, what is the problem first of all? Right. What is happening? It's kind of like, what is everyone feeling? What are the feelings of the room? Okay, so wife, mom, like, what's happening? So she's got like her side of the story, you know, she was doing this, doing that, and child, you know, did this, and maybe from a parent's point of view, she felt disrespected or frustrated or whatever the case may be. And before you jump in and fix and solve that, we need to then still look over at the child and say, like, okay, well, what was happening from your perspective? You were just trying to ask a question, and mom didn't seem like she was paying attention. She was distracted or something. And so you felt blank, 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 whatever. So now we've got like some of the story put on the table, like what happened, right? And there is a separation, there's a distinction between what happened, the actual events that unfolded that are factual and kind of objective, and then how you feel about it, right? These things happened and it impacted me in this way. Well, when mom said this, I felt that way. Or when child said this, I felt this way. Now we've got our emotions on the table, and we can understand what it is that we need to be responsible to. So being responsible for would not mean I need to go out of my way to, like, you know, help you understand what you're feeling. And I guess this is tricky for me. I don't know if I actually really like this example, because in a parent-child dynamic, that is your job.
You have to like this example.
That is your job, right? To help your kid identify what they're feeling, where did it come from, understand, like, you know, is that why you whatever, like, label it, name it for them, because you're literally training them how to experience their emotions.
Well, the other side of the coin that is in this that I like is the idea of humanity out of control. Because when you're describing, like, for example, even going in to try to find out what you're responsible to, and you're kind of trying to look at the feelings, there's a natural inclination for maybe our audience to think, like, well, the mom's okay, like, what are you doing? Why are we equaling the mom out here role wise? Like, we're, in other words, like, let's figure out what both of you guys are. Isn't the mom just right? You know, in the situation of like she's the parent, so we're not going to educate the mom the same way we're as far as like tuning in. It feels like it's a devalue of the role in some ways, but that's not happening. Like, understanding everything that's going on in the room of what you're responsible to is like, the mom's got her own feelings. So in a worst case scenario, as a parent, which is kind of why I like this example in this way, is that if your co-parent was degrading your child, you would step in front of the child and say, you can't talk to them this way. You basically, because you can't, you need to intervene in a way that you're caring for what's going on in the scenario from a protection standpoint. So I'm only saying that not to muddy the waters. I'm just saying, like, when you have that much emotion in the room, like, of what's going on in whatever situation it is, understanding what's happening by slowing things down, which I see why maybe you wouldn't like this example, by the way, because it's kind of too much in a way. Yeah,
because I think I want people to understand at its core, at its basic concept, what does it mean to be responsible for feelings? And I think when you throw, if you're looking at too much of it, it's kind of like, let's just start with one. So like if we were saying like the husband and wife, for example,
Right.
The husband's got some feelings. Maybe he was doing something and it made the wife feel alone because he was not supporting, whatever. So, okay, he's got this behavior. He did something. It's an action. She's got feelings about it. She feels alone, even though, let's say, that's not the case. Let's say it was not even really true that he's just always, sitting on the couch and never there, whatever. But that's how she feels in the moment. Okay. So if the behavior happened, he can acknowledge, yeah, I was sitting on the couch, or yeah, I was watching TV or whatever, and I can see how it impacted you. So being responsible to feelings is seeing, labeling, understanding, and acknowledging, and even you could say validating that those feelings exist and that they're legitimate and they make sense. You don't have to agree that they are the right thing of what happened, right? He's not agreeing that I am never here, I never support you. He's agreeing that when I did this behavior, it impacted her in this way, and she had these feelings about it. And he's like, yeah, that makes sense that you would feel that way. And then, we did a previous episode on some remorse. Go back and listen to that if you haven't heard it. But he's got to feel something and say like, hey, I'm really sorry I made you feel this way. Acknowledge that there was an impact and then he feels bad that she feels that way. But that's where it stops. He's got to stop there and then say, because that's compassion, empathetic, but then he's got to stop and say, it's her job to manage those feelings because those feelings are inside her. So now she's got to regulate herself. She's got to change her thinking about it. Like, okay, what really happened? Or let's get some clarity on who this guy really is, not just who he is in this moment based on my feelings. I got to forgive him, and then essentially get back into his connection with him.
Right. So there's two pieces there going on at the same time. One is that what you're saying is this is how you care for them. You are going to care for them in this way. You are responsible to their feelings. So you are staying with them and you are understanding what they feel because you care about what they feel. The other side of the coin is you might edit your behavior. You might realize like, oh, I actually do that. I can totally see how that comes off. Like I'm going to edit that.
And not even because you agree that you're causing that, but you're just like, oh, I don't want you to feel that way. That's easy enough for me to change. Okay.
Right. And then the other side of the coin is if you're the one like on that situation, another partner that's kind of offended and feels alone, that you are not entitled to this other person changing all their behavior now because they share. Like that's not where we're going. It's right. Just like, okay, they're respecting me. You still need to figure out how you're going to tolerate that in light of who the person is overall. And this is just how conversations go. But that's the difference between like, trying to expect the fix to happen and the change to happen. You should expect to be listened to. That should happen. The idea of like, oh, thanks for telling me, bye, don't care. You should expect to be listened to.
Yeah, and just in the last minute here of our episode, if you listen to our episode on remorse, if you genuinely do have empathy and care and compassion for the other person, if you've hurt them, it will impact you. It will change you, right? It will prompt you to want to do something differently, at the very least, to be more considerate or aware of the other person.
Right, yeah.
So with all of that, care about other people, genuinely care about them, but also give them space to let them care about and for themselves and for their own emotions.
Yeah, give yourself the space. Have a great day.
Okay. Great.
Sorry, I blew it. There's so much.